Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Now you're probably tired of hearing me say this every single video, but that's what you get for watching someone who suffers from chronic migraines. I have a migraine, so if I sound unenergetic, I slur my speech, or anything like that, that might be the cause. I currently just took a pill and I'm drinking some caffeine, so hopefully that helps. I finally have part 3 of this series up. So many people asked me for this, more than I thought, to be honest. But before I even begin discussing the issue, first off, I want to thank my friend Audrey for helping me write the script of this video. As I mentioned in other videos and on Twitter, I was very hesitant on having this part 3. I didn't want to give more attention to her and the awful things she has done. I mentioned this in the group chat with my internet friends after one of them asked me when I was posting the 3rd video. Audie made a point which I respected a lot coming from a trans woman herself. She told me that many people didn't know the full story or were completely unaware of it at all. So putting the information out there for other cis people to learn about it, to see how bad it all is, wasn't a bad idea. What is not okay is to keep bringing it up to trans people who pretty much know. Believe me, they know. So here's the thing. If you're someone who's here to listen to the information because you want to know the full story or want to know more about it, that's fine. But I discourage you from sharing this video, especially to your trans friends or acquaintances, because believe me when we tell you that they know, and they don't need to keep getting reminded of it. If you're a trans woman and want to still watch, of course there's no problem with that, but you can't expect every single person to be okay with it. While someone like Audrey is okay talking and writing about this topic because it's in her particular field of study and work, other people might find this incredibly triggering and hurtful. Most of all, I encourage you all to stop sharing you-know-who's tweets, stop making her name important. I know it's almost impossible, but letting her fade to nothing is the best we can do. Now, I'm going to go as in-depth as possible with the history of you-know-who's transphobic comments on the internet, and some that are not on the internet. And just let me tell you right here, you probably know how long this video is, but I don't, and the script for this video is twice as long as the full script of the last 2 videos. So I'm probably gonna be sitting here for a while, and you're probably gonna be here for a while too, so just grab a snack or something, I don't know. As always, all of my sources will be linked down below. I'm also listing in the description, and if for some reason that isn't enough, I'll also list in the pinned comment GoFundMes and Petitions, as well as a list of trans artists you should all go and support. I also want to add, because I got a DM regarding this, I'm not making any money out of any of these videos. My channel is not monetized. You know who's transphobic comments caused quite an uproar online earlier in 2020, but this wasn't the first time her opinion was heard online. This was nothing new for people who have been following with her BS for years, but even I was surprised at some of the things I found out while researching for this video. But let's go back to 2019, where I think it all really began, at least how it began online. It all started with this tweet on December 19, 2019. Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. Hashtag I stand with Maya, hashtag this is not a drill. Out of context, this seemed weird and unspecific, but once you learn what was behind such a tweet, you'll see the beginning of the end. As this Vox.com article titled "You Know Who's Latest Tweet Seemed Like Transphobic BS, Her Fans Are Heartbroken" by Adjoa Romano points out, You Know Who's tweet reveals itself as a shocking dismissal of transgender identity. Its first 3 lines seem to directly attack trans identity, while its final line mischaracterizes the facts surrounding a court case that involves significant transphobia. So let's get some context on what motivated such a tweet. In 2018, the Center for Global Development, or CGD, which according to Wikipedia is a nonprofit think tank based in Washington, D.C. and London that focuses on international development, hired a woman named Maya Forstater as a consultant. Forstater is a supporter of a transphobic political movement that argues that transgender women are not real women and should be exempt from the legal and social protections given to cis women. In September of the same year, Forstater tweeted critical and dehumanizing things about trans and non-binary people. These tweets made some members of CGD uncomfortable, so in March 2019 they decided to not renew Forstater's contract. Her response to this was to sue the company, claiming that it was workplace discrimination, which is a hypocrisy to say the least, but let's move on. This case was seen as a major test of the law. If the ruling ended up being in favor of Forstater, it would probably bring on an onslaught of harassment towards the LGBTQA community. Thankfully, in December 18, Forstater's claim was dismissed, and I'm gonna quote this. In a ruling which outlined her extensive history of transphobic remarks and found that she is absolutist in her view of sex, will refer to a person by the sex she considers appropriate even if it violates her dignity and or creates an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment. The approach is not worthy of respect in a democratic society. And well, next day is when we saw you-know-whose tweet was published. Now you know the context. Now, as someone who has been pointing out her BS for years now, it was shocking, but not surprising. I was shocked that she would be so blunt about it, but seeing her track record of queerbaiting, racism, culture appropriation, etc., it wasn't a surprise to add one more thing to the list. What was surprising to me was that she had been leaving transphobic breadcrumbs since before the tweet. The Silkworm, a novel published by her in 2015 under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith, I think is how you pronounce it, I don't care, has a rather disturbing scene. I'm gonna quote this from an article called Is You Know Who Transphobic? A Trans Woman Investigates by Carolyn Burns. I want to add that this article was written in March of 2019, just in case anyone's wondering. In the scene, the trans woman Pippa follows and tries to stab the protagonist, Cormoran Strike, or however you pronounce that, before getting trapped in Strike's office. After demanding Pippa's ID, her trans status is revealed and her visible Adam's apple is noted, while it's noted that her hands were jammed in her pockets. Pippa tries several times to escape the office before Strike finally says, "If you go for the door one more time, I'm calling the police and I'll testify and be glad to watch you go down for attempted murder. And it won't be fun for you, Pippa," he added, not pre-op. After the reference to prison rape, Pippa is described as appearing unstable and aggressive, though it should be noted that other characters in the scene pity her. It's an entirely common though insulting trope about trans women, that they are aggressive and are unable to overcome their masculine nature, not to mention villainous. That has become all too common from cisgender author with only a passing knowledge of trans people. It's very clear to me and others that this is written from a point of view of someone who's transphobic. There's just no other explanation. It's all very unnecessary in my opinion. Now, I've never read this book or had any interest in them, but I always found it odd that she uses a quote-unquote male pseudonym for them. Like, for someone who likes to say she fights for women's rights, why? Never made sense to me, but I feel like that's a whole other conversation, so let's move on. Another breadcrumb was that in 2018, she liked a transphobic tweet that accused trans women of being men in dresses. This was explained away as an accidental click, and I remember believing this. I mean, it has happened to me. You're just scrolling on Twitter and accidentally like something. But hey, she did it again, liked another transphobic tweet. Also an accident? Well, knowing what we know now in 2020, we definitely know it was not an accident, which makes me wonder, what changed from then to now? Why claim it was an accident and then a couple of years later come out full force against trans women? Was this because they were scared for the Fantastic Beasts series, or did she start becoming comfortable with the idea? Because back in June 2019, it was shown on Twitter that she followed many outspoken transphobes. And that is the big issue. That the reason why people like her being open about their transphobia and masking them as defending women's rights is a huge problem. It makes other people comfortable to do the same. People should never feel comfortable. When I speak about things like transphobia, homophobia, racism, misogyny, etc., I'm not there to change people's minds. I know that most people won't change their mind. The reason I speak up is so they don't feel comfortable saying such things. I want them to know that if they so much as try to insinuate something hateful, there's people out there who are gonna come for them. But anyways, back then it was all dismissed as she liked one tweet and follows many people, so it means nothing. And like, I get that. Sometimes you follow a certain account because you like their art and then months later find out they're retweeting racist posts. You know what most people do though? They immediately unfollow. Did she do that though? I don't think so. By the way, if you ever see me following or liking someone like that, let me know. I have people DM me like, hey, you know that person you just retweeted? They said this like a week ago. And I'm like, yikes, thanks for letting me know. And I unfollow. Needless to say, all that was pretty much confirmed in her December 2019 tweet. The Harry Potter community was heartbroken and angry with all due reason. Many trans fans went on Twitter to show their disappointment. Here's a reply to her tweet that truly broke my heart. I grew up as a trans child reading your books as an escape. I would often pick out names from characters to give to myself before I even felt comfortable in who I was. This decision to support people that hate me and want to do me harm, it brings me tears. Why? And now I want to add something that my friend Audrey wrote here during the script. Words hurt, but to boot, supporting people that want to actively hurt me, it's appalling. Now let's move on to earlier this year, June, when everything came back full force. On June 6th, she tweeted this. People who menstruate, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Womden, Wimpund, Womund. And then this article titled Opinion, Creating a More Equal Post-COVID-19 World for People Who Menstruate was linked with the tweet. Obviously, she takes offense that the article didn't use the word women. This tweet brought a lot of backlash and she of course couldn't just leave it there. So she followed that tweet with this thread. If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many meaningful discussions in life. It isn't hate to speak the truth. The idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, that is to male violence, quote unquote, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is a nonsense. I expect every trans person's right to live any way they feel authentic and comfortable to them, and march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. First of all, trans women's right don't invalidate cis women's right. What? Who even thinks that? Nobody's erasing women by being inclusive to trans women. She says she's been empathetic to trans people for decades, which we know by everything I mentioned previously said no, that's not true. You're not empathetic to trans women and then write a scene like that in one of your books or actively support someone who wants to remove their rights. I'd march with you, she says. Then why have you never done it? That just seems like an empty phrase there because it's not like she never had the chance to march with them. There's plenty of opportunities to do that. So excuse me if I don't believe that for a second. My life has been shaped by being a female. Okay, and nobody's taking that away from you. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. It is not hateful to say that being female has shaped you, but everything else you have said is hateful. It's transphobic and acting like a victim when you started a conversation yourself. Nobody said anything to you. You took offense on something that wasn't affecting you at all. The article referring to quote-unquote people that menstruate doesn't hurt you at all, ma'am. Yet you feel compelled to tweet that and then, oh no, poor you, people are acting so hateful towards you, like literally fuck off. And then it gets worse when on June 10th, she published a post on her site called You Know Who writes about her reasons for speaking out on sex and gender issues and tweeted it out just saying, turf wars. I'm not gonna link that post because fuck that. You can find it if you want to read it, but I'm gonna give you a summary of it so you don't have to give more clicks to that website. I'll quote the introduction so you get a feel of it. This isn't an easy piece to write for reasons that will shortly become clear, but I know it's time to explain myself in an issue surrounded by toxicity. I write this without any desire to add to that toxicity. As you can see from the get-go, she acts like the victim in all of this, and you know by saying she doesn't have any desire to add to the toxicity, it's gonna be pretty toxic. Because when others say things about her, it's toxic. But when she says the truth, then it's alright. Now I'm gonna summarize this to the best of my abilities. It starts with her talking about her tweet in support about Maya Forstater, and her interest in trans issue predates that. Apparently, she had been researching it for almost 2 years, which I mean, we here know how good her research is, so yeah, sure. According to her, this research involved debates about gender identity, meeting with trans people and reading books, blogs, and articles by trans people, gender specialists, intersex people, and all kinds of people. She feels the need to list them all like somehow that makes it more legit. The reason for all this research is for a crime series she's writing, which unfortunately we now know about, and we'll just get to that later. Then she goes and plays the victim once again. Poor her got threats for accidentally liking a tweet. I can't believe she still has the nerve to call that an accident. Anyway, she throws a petty party and justifies her liking transphobic tweets and following transphobes. She then goes on to explain that she knew that she was gonna get cancelled for supporting Maya Forstater, but she was well versed in being cancelled at this point, so I guess she didn't care anymore. Now here's the kicker. She says she expected all the hate. She expected getting death threats and being called horrible names, but in the next paragraph, she says she didn't expect to get showered by positive, grateful, and supportive thoughts. Excuse me? What did she think then? She thought that there were just no other transphobes in the world? She thought her words had no impact? That someone with such a big platform wouldn't open up the way for more people that thought like her to now be comfortable expressing their opinions? I also want to add here that cancel culture is not a thing that's real for people like her. You can't cancel someone with that much influence. So her mentioning getting canceled was to add to the victim card in my opinion. Anyway, she got praised for defending women or whatever, blah 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 blah. 90% of this article is her acting like a victim, by the way. Oh no, it affected her mental health. Poor her in her $1 million mansion getting hate for saying hateful things. A hypocrite. She mentioned that she took a break because of her mental health and then came back during the pandemic because she's a good, kind person and wanted to share free children's book. But oh no, what happened? She got hate. People started calling her names and throwing hate at her again. Like, did she think her taking a few months off would make everyone forget that she was a transphobe? Girl, what? The funniest part to me is this one, and I'm gonna quote it. Activists who clearly believe themselves to be good, kind, and progressive people swarm back into my timeline, assuming a right to police my speech, accuse me of hatred, call me misogynistic slurs, and above all, as every woman involved in this debate will know, TERF. I mean, you were hateful and you were what people consider a TERF, so what did you expect? Everyone to welcome you back with open arms because you wrote a beloved children's series once years ago? She goes on to explain what a TERF is, which, if you don't know, is an acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. It's a term we, and by we I mean my friend Audrey and I, and also my editor Creaky, wants to add here that this is her opinion too, because I have a little note and I'm gonna read it out loud. It's a little note that says, me too. Anyways, we're not really fond of this term because being trans exclusionary immediately revokes your feminist card. So you can't be a feminist if you're excluding trans women. But no shame to you if you use the term. It's known and we get what it means. Just wanted to mention that in case you were curious. We would rather have a term that didn't include the word feminist at all, but you know, that's another discussion we can have. Anyways, back to the post. She goes to explain that many women are not called TERFs even though they were never radical. And then she gives this awful example. Example of so-called TERFs range from mother of a gay child who was afraid their child wanted to transition to escape homophobic bullying, to a hit hard to totally unfeminist older lady who's vowed never to visit Marks and Spencer again because they're allowing any man who says they identify as a woman into the women's changing room. Ironically, radical feminists aren't even trans exclusionary. They include trans men in their feminisms because they were born women. What? I'm just like speechless. If trans men are included in feminism, by the way, it's because feminism looks for equality for everyone, not because of what genitals they were born with. I guess can't expect a smooth brain like her to understand. She then talks about institutions cowering because they fear being called transphobic, which to me has a very simple solution. Hey, if you don't want to be called transphobic, then don't be transphobic. Boom, solve your problems, easy. Then she goes and says why she speaks up, which is like, please don't speak up. Why are you speaking up? But apparently she has 5 reasons, and let me tell you, as you might expect, they're all BS. Let's start with the first one. She has charities that support women, like a project for female prisoners, one for survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, and another for MS. She lists them all, obviously, because she's a good, kind person and we need to know all her charities. And according to her, blurring the lines of sex and gender will somehow affect those. Here's the thing I don't get. Why doesn't your charity also help trans women that are prisoners? Why doesn't it also help trans women who are victims of domestic and sexual abuse? Why do you want to exclude them? They deserve help too. Now, the MS one apparently is because MS behaves differently depending on if you're a man or a woman, which I don't know anything about that, but in my opinion, even if it does, I don't see how giving rights to trans people affects it at all. Like, even if it behaves different, every patient is different too, so that would depend on the doctor treating the person. You can still do your research. I honestly don't see the problem, unless you're hurt and want to make it a problem. Reason number 2 says that as an ex-teacher and a founder of a children's charity, she's interested in the safety of education. And I don't know why the trans rights movement matters here, honestly. Are you scared kids are gonna have a more inclusive education? I'm confused. Children should learn about trans people in school? What kind of reason is this? I don't get it. The third reason is she's interested in freedom of speech. The dumbest argument in the book, in my opinion. Everyone always invokes freedom of speech when it comes to taking away rights and spouting hate, so I'm not gonna even get into that, because I think we all know this. We all think this is stupid. That's not how freedom of speech works. Now, the fourth reason is where, according to her, it gets personal. But honestly, I don't see it. She's concerned about young women wishing to transition that end up detransitioning. I'm not gonna go too in depth at this point because it just goes into a lot of facts or whatever about detransitioning. I myself don't know much about the topic, but Audrey, who is more versed in it, says that most of it is not good research and it omits a lot of the actual good information out there about transitioning, which is not a lot. There's not a lot of information about transitioning. It's a whole topic I encourage you to read about on your own, but just know that what she says in this post is very one-sided and apparently there's a lot of misinformation about it. I'm gonna just kind of gloss over it, but just know that there's way more than what I'm gonna say here. And this all comes from Audrey, who knows a lot more about this than me. So before that though, I want to add that how is this personal for her? I honestly don't think she cares about these people at all. Like people who are transitioning, I don't think she cares about them. I think they just further her agenda and that's why she's using them. Detransitioning is a thing, but she doesn't list some of the causes. Like, here's me before writing this and learning about all this, ignorant me knew that one of the reasons for detransitioning was because the abuse they suffer as a trans person and they just wanted things to go back to normal, even if it didn't feel quite right. That's like one of the reasons I knew. But here is, this part is all kind of like what we found out and what Audrey knows. When we researched, we left some links in the description about it. The truth is, demographers don't really know an exact number on how many people transitions, since there is no clear-cut line in what transitioning means. For some people, it might be as simple as just letting go of the gender norms imposed on them, while for others, it might go to the extent of getting surgery. There's like just a lot of in between. So a lot of the information she puts in this post is not reliable. As I said, I'm gonna link an article down below that goes further into explaining this. It kind of like debunks everything she says, but I'm gonna summarize it here for you in case you don't want to read, but I encourage you to educate yourself. So yeah, demographers don't know numbers because of what I said before. The reason there's a rise in gender affirming treatment is because it's more accessible now, not because there's some transgender agenda as she would make you believe in that post. And as I mentioned before as well, while there are people who are detransitioning, it's a small number, and the reason is rarely regret. It's usually that they're not finding acceptance, they're having a hard time finding a job or housing, their family or friends are rejecting them. But there's also a research that shows that if there is regret, it's usually on the result of their surgery and not on their identity. So yeah, we knew she was bad at researching, but this is so harmful for trans people. All of this misinformation could easily affect their actual lives, while you know who is sitting on her comfy chair sipping tea in her $1,000,000 mansion, completely unaffected by cancel culture. Now her last reason, because the fourth one wasn't bad enough, is she's deeply concerned about the consequences of the current trans activisms. She mentions her history as a victim of domestic abuse and being sexually assaulted, and how those traumatic events could affect her daughter. She says she doesn't mention this to garner sympathy, but to show solidarity with other women who were also victims. And look, I might get hate for this, but just listen. No woman should go through those things, and I'm extremely empathetic of this as someone who is also a victim, but I don't see how this is relevant to this particular conversation. Trans activism in no way invalidates us as victims and survivors, my opinion, but you let me know what you think. She then goes on to say this, which I will quote: "If you could come inside my head and understand what I feel when I read about a trans woman dying at the hands of a violent man, you'd find solidarity and kinship. I have a visceral sense of terror in which those trans women will have to spend their last seconds on earth, because I too have no moments of blind fear when I realize that the only thing keeping me alive was the shaky self-restraint of my attacker." I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. Doesn't she see that her words, everything she's said and done so far, is just gonna make all that violence against trans women happen more? Especially when you take into account the book. But we're not in the book part yet. But yes, knowing about the book pisses me off, and she dared to write that. She goes on to say that she wants trans women to be safe, but at the same time she doesn't want cis girls and women to feel less safe. No correlation there, Joe. There's no reason why trans and cis women can't feel safe together. There's no reason why we can't support each other. It's because you clearly know nothing about trans women. I don't believe her even a little bit that she did over 2 years of research and talked to trans people, because if you had, you would know. You would know that they don't pose any kind of special threat. They're just like everyone else. If a trans woman goes and does a crime, it's not any different than anyone else committing that crime. They don't just transition to go peeping on stalls. That's ridiculous. Now, believe it or not, this post still keeps going after this. I'm gonna leave it here though, because most of it is just her playing the victim. And oh no, someone said she was Voldemort. What a tragedy. I do wanna read her parting words, so buckle up. The last thing I want to say is this: I haven't written this essay in the hope that anybody would get out a violin for me. Not even a teeny weeny one. I'm extraordinarily fortunate. I'm a survivor, certainly not a victim. I've only mentioned my past because, like every other human being on this planet, I have a complex backstory which shapes my fears, my interests, and my opinions. I never forget that inner complexity when I'm creating a fictional character, and I certainly never forget it when it comes to trans people. All I'm asking, all I want, is for empathy, similar understanding to be extended to the many millions of women whose sole crime is wanting their concerns to be heard without receiving threats and abuse. A real hypocrite, this woman. God, it's just so fucked up to ask for empathy when all she did was play the victim card while putting down a whole group of people and endangering their lives. If I wasn't clear before, trans women are women and their identity does not pose any specific danger to anyone. You, on the other hand, Joe, you're a threat to them. Did I tell you that all this happened while the world was collectively protesting for Black Lives Matter movement? Yeah, she decided to ignore all that and just, be a transphobe. Obviously, the fan backlash was unlike any I've ever seen before, and I want to share a couple of tweets. There's just no evidence that me being me is causing problems for any of the other women I've met. If there are ever any problems within women and trans women, they should be dealt with sensitively and sensibly on a case-by-case basis. Please, for the love of God, leave us alone. Do not read hashtag JK Rowling's transphobia manifesto. I already did it for you. Every line is misinformation, fear-mongering, misgendering, othering, ignorance, far-right language, dog whistles, and pure hate. And it's not just ugly, this is hate. Don't ingest this BS, I beg you. And I'm telling you, don't read it. I already told you what this is about, and you already know it's bad, and I didn't even tell you half of it. The celebrities weren't quiet about this either. Daniel Radcliffe actually released a statement via the Trevor Project's Twitter. 78% of transgender and non-binary youth reported being the subject of discrimination due to their gender identity. It's clear that we need to do more to support transgender and non-binary people. And he wasn't the only Potter actor who did this. Emma Watson, Bonnie Wright, Rupert Grint, and even Eddie Redmayne all released statements rejecting you-know-who's publication. Let's talk about July now, because yes, in July she went on another Twitter rant, of course. It all started with Twitter user Sinead actually tweeting about how she had liked the tweet about how hormone prescriptions are the new antidepressant, and her response was, oh boy. Now this is a long thread, but let's just go over some of the important points. I've ignored fake tweets attributed to me and retweeted widely. I've ignored porn tweeted at children on a thread about their art. I've ignored death and rape threats. I'm not going to ignore this. When you lie about what I believe about mental health medication, and when you misrepresent the views of trans women for whom I feel nothing but admiration and solidarity, you cross a line. Excuse me? Did she say ignoring porn tweeted at children? I'm just... Okay, not something you might want to say publicly. Hey, I ignore porn tweeted at children, but when it comes to something about me, I won't ignore that. And of course, she couldn't ignore her transphobic sway either, because she goes on to say this. Many health professionals are concerned that young people struggling with their mental health are being shunted towards hormones and surgery, when this may not be in their best interest. Many, myself included, believe we are watching a new kind of conversion therapy for young gay people who are being set on a lifelong path of medicalization that may result in the loss of their fertility and or full sexual function. Oh, now she brings conversion therapy into the mix. Wow, I'm just so exhausted at this point. Can't even imagine how trans people feel about this. Like, if I'm exhausted, how y'all dealing with this? This is why, and I repeat, don't show these things to your trans friends. They deserve better. They don't need to hear her stupid stuff. Anyway, to make a stupidly unnecessarily long thread short, she once again goes on about transitioning and hormones and how it's all bad according to her half-assed research. We don't need to go over that again, so let's just cut it there. Now the book. Oh, the book. The book. I don't even want to talk about the book because it's like the gross cherry on top. But yeah, the book. So remember earlier how I mentioned that she did all that, I'm gonna call it research, because that's what she calls it, I guess. Well, on September 14, we learned more about this book. Troubled Blood is her new book, and guess what it's about? Oh yeah, and I quote, a murderous cis man who dresses as a woman to kill his victims. Yes, sure, she cares about trans women. She respects them and feels empathy for them. Sure, I can see that. It's totally obvious now. Just, I don't even know. Don't tell me this is not gonna have any repercussions toward trans women. Because she already has a legion of supporters that are saying she's just doing it to defend women's rights. You think that kind of book that shows one of the worst stereotypes about trans women is not gonna add to the violence we see against them every single day? I'm horrified. I don't even want to say anything else about the book. Just don't buy it. Please don't buy the book. Don't give that woman more money. She doesn't need it. Put that money to good use, like one of the GoFundMes listed down below, huh? How about that? Okay, so at this point the script was over and we were just proofreading and adding some extra info, but something else happened. Yes, more happened. I know, and more is about to happen. I know. So I'm gonna heavily reference this article from Pink News by Reese Smith, titled, You Know Who Platformed Anti-Trans Shop Selling Lesbians Don't Have Penises and Fuck Your Pronouns merch. Do I need to say more? On September 22, she tweeted a picture of her shirt saying, Sometimes a t-shirt speaks to you. The shirt says The Witch Doesn't Burn, and then links the webpage where she got it. Now I'm not gonna mention it here because gross. Don't look for the page, please. Just, yeah. Now this page sells shirts, badges, mugs, stuff like that. And it has a category called Gender Critical, and guess what? It's filled with transphobic phrases. In it, we find anything from stickers to mugs saying phrases like "fuck your pronouns," "don't call me six," "notorious transphobe," "member of TERFs," and more. And this side is ran by Angela Seawild, who is the co-founder of Get the L Out, an anti-trans lesbian separatist group. You can't tell me this is a coincidence. There's no way you casually speak about transphobia for months and then inadvertently promote an anti-trans shop. Empathy is what she said somewhere? Sure. Now she's still gonna say liking those tweets was an accident? Well, that's all for now. Just wanted to say that what I've been saying all along. Don't support this woman. Okay? That's all I have for you. Once again, thanks to my friend Audrey for helping him out with this research and writing this. Thanks to my friend Creaky for proofreading the script. I would normally link Audrey's social media in it, but she asked me not to for very understandable reasons. Who you should totally check out instead are all the artists I'm gonna link either in the description or in the pinned comment, because the description has like a letter cap. So if I fill up the description, I'll just leave a pinned comment. Also, don't forget to sign the petitions I left, and if it's possible, contribute to the GoFundMes. And sorry if this video was too long, but I hope now you're well informed in case you weren't, or you learned something new. And as always, just speak up, because the more voices are out there against this kind of mentality, the stronger we are, and the more we can help people who actually need help and who actually need empathy and who actually need, a movement in their favor. Not that woman. She doesn't need that. She doesn't need any of that. She's with a billionaire. Have a good day, good night, and I'll see you next time. Bye.